It's 11 minutes past 8 this morning. We're turning our attention to rugby. Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, good morning to you. How are you?
Good, Ger, thanks. And yourself?
We'll get on to Ulster and Dan McFarland in a moment, but I do want to start with Johnny Sexton's health, which, let's face it, is the barometer of Irish rugby's well-being at the moment. The World Cup year is officially here. We've been banging on about it for 3.5 years. We're entitled to talk about it now non-stop every day between now and September when it actually happens. And lo and behold, the first thing that happens is Johnny Sexton's out for a significant period of time.
Yeah, it didn't look great, did it? Unfortunately, he took a heavy knock to the face, the side of the jaw, and we don't have the prognosis yet or the results of a scan, but it didn't look like something that you can just shake off and be back in playing next week or playing for Leinster in Europe the week after. So it's one that's it's disappointing, I think, and he hasn't had a lot of rugby play this year, and he's been minded a little bit, but he'd be a significant loss. But for the Six Nations, it's better if something like this happens now rather than at the World Cup, because he would be a significant loss given the way he's been playing.
I saw some debate online about his body position at the tackle and whether or not he was lucky not to have been red carded. Do you have a view on that, or was that just a bit of aftertime?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the first one of the thoughts that came into my head when you tackle that high and you make contact. Albeit it was his jaw with Jared Butler's head. He could have been carded for it, but he does tackle high, doesn't he? He's done that for a long, long time, and he usually wraps the ball, and he's taken a lot of kind of heavy knocks over the years, and they've been kind of highlighted and spoken about. But it's one that could have been looked at. But I think he's absorbing the tackle a lot more than that forward motion at the end when, there's a lot of debate around the tackler's technique around, the height they're tackling at, and the onus is on the tackler. But it's one that could have been maybe looked at, but I think he's absorbing the tackle a lot more than any sort of movement going forward.
Regular listeners to this show will know that I had been saying that I thought that him and maybe Sean O'Brien and a few others should have been given 6 months off in advance of the last World Cup. Like, this might now be an enforced period of rest for him. Do we just need to stop and hit the reset button and go, all we want is Sexton to be playing well by the time the World Cup comes, however that needs to happen? I guess this is twofold here, right? Is there a world in which Johnny Sexton last night got injured in that tackle because he wasn't quite at full match sharpness, having not played much recently, and so therefore he probably needs to play a good bit more than we actually think in advance of the World Cup, but that might be okay, and maybe he plays every minute of all the warm-ups and everybody's like, why are they doing this? Because he needs to get to that match sharpness? Or do you literally wrap him up in cotton wool and the next time we see him in a meaningful match is the start of the World Cup?
No, for me, it's too risky doing that. You can't wrap a guy in cotton wool. I think he was always going to, and he's managed pretty well at his age anyway, and as are most of the internationals here around their game minutes and stuff like that. His would be probably monitored a little bit more, and certainly we do want him at a World Cup. But I don't think you can wrap someone in cotton wool and give him a complete break from the game and bring him back for World Cup warm-ups in August and hope that it's too risky to do something like that. I think it could backfire on you. But if he's not available, if he's fractured his jaw and there is a fracture there maybe, which it hasn't been clarified yet, but it certainly looked like there was a serious mark on the side of his face, that he had a dent on the side of his jaw, which didn't look good. That could be down to it could have swelled up really quickly. But if he was to miss the Six Nations, well, it's more game time for Joey Carberry, Jack Crowley, Ross Byrne, and they've got to cope, and they coped against Australia, albeit it wasn't at the same level and it wasn't the best performance against Australia in November. But it's a little bit of luck that we need come November to have such a pivotal player available to Ireland. But I wouldn't say take him out of the game and wrap him in cotton wool. He needs to play rugby as well.
Yeah. The one last point about this is that the team is a completely different team. The Leinster team and the Ireland team are completely different teams when Sexton plays. All the advanced analytics show just what kind of difference he makes to the side. And yet, we can't put all our eggs in the Sexton basket. We've seen that he's barely played since the All Blacks series, which was obviously sensational. But at this stage of his career, he's going to pick up injuries. So those other players you're talking about, this is it now for them. Like, this is their moment to stick a hand up and go, I can be the player who starts at number 10 when Sexton's not around. And if Sexton is around, I'm the one breathing down his neck. Is there anybody who's ready to do that at the moment?
Well, I think obviously there's a big debate about this and the level that Johnny Sexton brings. I think the composure, the determination, the control, and the kind of energy that he brings to that Irish jersey when he's there and he kind of lifts players around him, that's pretty significant. It's hard to replicate that with the other players. Obviously, Jack Crowley got the nod in November against Australia. It was a big step up for him. There's a lot of excitement about him, and we're seeing the raw talent that he has. And I know we'll talk about it in a minute. The win in Belfast for Munster. There's still a couple of mistakes in him. There's still a little bit of jitterness. He's a wonderful footballer, and he has that little bit of spark that you want. Joey Carberry, I think he has that ability to step up there, and he's done it on a couple of occasions as well. It was very frustrating in the sense that, you know, Carberry got that head knock against Fiji and wasn't around to maybe start. But obviously, it's hard to replicate a Johnny Sexton. You know, there'll probably never be another Johnny Sexton at that level. The leadership, maybe some of the younger players, maybe Crowley will in a few years. Harry Byrne is back playing as well. So I'm not sure. Is there anyone at the same? There's no one at the same level, but I think it could be a great opportunity for someone like Crowley or Carberry to excel himself and kind of get a run. I think he's only had five starts or 6 starts for Ireland at out half, Joey Carberry. So, coming into this year, it's not ideal, and it could come back to cause Ireland problems. But it is what it is, and they've got to get on. And Six Nations is an opportunity for somebody else if Johnny Sexton isn't available.
I can see it in your eyes, Quinny. You're mad to talk about Belfast. You're mad to talk about it. We might as well focus on the negatives for Ulster first before we get into the positives with Munster. But we mentioned the Dan McFarlane quotes earlier on in the show. Like, they really stand out because he's like, we were terrible. When they held onto the ball, they looked magnificent. We looked careless at times, like we didn't care how precious the ball was. Fairly strong comments from McFarlane after that match.
Yeah, very strong comments. As long as you don't want to talk about Brentford last night, Shane, that's all right. But Belfast on Sunday was good. I think it probably shows that they are on the right track, in the sense that, you know, I don't like the South Africa results, like the Edinburgh result a couple of weeks ago at the start of November. I thought they were kind of pivotal moments for this team to go to Edinburgh and produce the performance they did, get a bonus point win. They probably should have won the game against Leinster. Well, certainly could have won the game against Leinster. They're in dire need of points, and you think going to Belfast, this is, you know, predictably it could be another win for Ulster. Even when I played back in, it's a good while ago now, it was always a difficult game, this game after Christmas, because you're going to be down some of the internationals, and it's a tough place to go and win. So no matter what position Munster were in and what squad they have, it was always a tough place to go. But I think we've seen glimpses, and we've spoken about it on the podcast and with you guys as well in the last few weeks, that there is glimpses that this team are starting to gel together a little bit. They're showing a bit of fight, determination, which is needed. Defensively, they're getting that stuff right. Bar Leinster, I think they're the second best defensive side in the URC, and that was even before this game on Sunday. So, you know, they're getting their fundamentals pretty good. I think obviously you can go into the set piece, and they lost lineouts early in the game, and you think the first half, opportunities gone when Ulster were down to 14 men. They weren't able to score. But I thought the reaction, and there seems to be a little bit of a spring in their step, and they're far from the finished article. I think they look at this game and certainly realise that they made some mistakes and opportunities, and they need to be better in certain things. But Dan McFarlane, in fairness to him, said that he didn't want to take away from the Munster performance. But when you go away from home and you have 65% possession and so up in 60% or over 60% territory as well, that would indicate that you're trying to play and that you have a lot of the ball. And I know the first half they had it, they weren't clinical enough with it. And Ulster had entries into the 22 that Dan McFarlane is talking about. But Munster look a lot more comfortable now in working together defensively. And, some of the penalties they gave away in the first half were silly. But it was a really good performance for them. The fight to come back against, on paper, a stronger side, a more settled side, in a sense that, Munster are still missing a lot of players and they were down their internationals. But it was a brilliant win for them. That's
the point, I think, Quinny, isn't it? The fact that Ulster had some internationals back, Munster still without, Tadhg Bear and Peter Mahoney, for example. Like, when is it panic stations for Ulster and Dan McFarland?
Yeah, well, look, Munster still down a number of players who can bolster the bench and give them a little bit of depth, particularly around the second row position. Kieran McDonald has come in a short-term contract. He was really good the other night. For Ulster, look, it's been a dreadful couple of weeks, and I think they going to Galway last week on the 23rd of December. You think for 50, 60 minutes it's good, and they've played well, and they've dominated, they've won the physical battle, and in the end they're hanging on for dear life. So, psychologically we talk about them a lot. Dan McFarlane said that himself that they were soft in a sense that, and he didn't specify physically or mentally, he wasn't really, but just as a team they were broken down easily and in Galway, and they could have ruined a perfect night from they got the win in the end 22-20, but the results against Sale, first half against La Rochelle, so he's worried, he's concerned, and he should be, but on paper they're a very, very dangerous side, but they're lacking something. Henderson has come back in the last few weeks, and they would have been really, really down the dumps after losing that game the other night at home.
So is it a crisis? Because it has the bang of a crisis off it at the moment.
Yeah, well, you'd feel like it is a crisis when you lose a game like this at home. You could put down the last few weeks to the travel, to a little bit of luck, bounce to the ball, maybe not. Everyone has little dips in the season, Ger, but this one will hurt a lot. Given it's at home, it's a packed house. It's the first game of the new season. Munster down the internationals, and you think you've got to win this game. Go back to June in the quarterfinals, and Leinster blew Munster away with a similar team, and Munster had a stronger side. So going up, I think Munster fans would be more hopeful going to Belfast, but they couldn't shake them off. I think obviously when Balakoon scores a try, if he gets a conversion, it's 16-5. It has a different feel. Munster getting the penalty, making it 14-8. Any team chasing a lead, if you bring it back to within that try and conversion score line, you're going to make it nervy, and they just lack a little bit of control and composure, Ulster, at vital times, and they allow teams back into it. But I just thought Munster were really brave in what they did, and they made a lot of line breaks. They kept going. They caused Ulster a lot of problems at the breakdown. So, from Dan McFarlane's point of view, I know he looked back in this and it was really poor and a lot of stuff they did. But on the other side, I think it showed that Munster are moving forward a little bit. The reality still is they're going to come up short, and they're still going to struggle, possibly to make the playoffs. But they've given themselves a real shot here. This was a win that wouldn't have been expected.
Two last points on this. Healy obviously performing the way he did. The links to Scotland won't go away. What do you think is going to happen here?
Um, I'm not sure, because I think, Ben Healy is a very talented player. He has ability. I think the only downside at the moment that I would see in his game is just physically, defensively, and probably when he's in collisions and in contact. For a big man, he needs to be a little bit more physical. He's a very talented guy, and he's shown that he's so laid back, doesn't panic, which is a brilliant attribute in a fly half, because they're usually under a lot of pressure. They have a lot of decisions to make, so he's very calm. So he has something other fly halves maybe don't have, that control, and I thought he was brilliant. So it's often the case when guys' backs are to the wall that they come out fighting, and they bring that little bit of fight and energy. He was very good in Cork against South Africa as well. So what's going to happen? I don't know. I think he'll certainly be tempted. This is the second time Scotland have come looking for him. His contract is up at the end of the season. He's got to assess where he's at. Jack Crowley has kind of leapfrogged him a little bit. Joey Carberry's there. Does he want to sit and be third choice? Does he believe that he can be first choice? Because they're not kids anymore now. These guys have played a good bit of rugby in the last 2 seasons. So it's a big decision. Munster would love to keep him, I'm sure, and he would be a very important player going forward. But I think the other night will certainly help the perception of Ben Healy, and it certainly puts him back on the radar again for people going, wow, this guy can do something here. And he was very, very good when he came on, and he's an undoubted talent.
It's hard to know what to think when there's a possibility we could have Cooney at 9 and Healy at 10 for Scotland.
Yeah.
Against us in the World Cup, and if Healy wants to go and play for Scotland, part of you thinks fair enough. If that's what you think is the right thing for you, then off you go, and that would be a sign that you don't fancy your chances of knocking over your opposition. And then part of you thinks Ireland don't really have a glut of brilliant young out halves, so let's make sure we keep him in the system and get the benefit of the fact that maybe in 3-4 years' time he is the best of that crop, because we don't know how they're all going to evolve and develop.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you can get 5, 6, 7 of these fly halves behind Johnny Sexton, and you keep shaking and rocking and seeing more and more of these guys, the chances are 1 or 2 of them are going to learn from Sexton, go on that path of developing their own game, and that character-wise, that resilience. It's hard to coach that stuff, but talent-wise, yeah, I think David Nucifora wouldn't want to lose him. I don't think Munster would want to lose him, but that carrot is kind of dangling there, international rugby and where he sees himself. So if you're Ben Healy, you're thinking, right, okay, what do I have to do now to get playing for Ireland? Well, I have to get a number 1 slot in Munster and start playing regularly for Munster in the big games, and then get called up to the Irish squad. So there's a good few steps to go there, in a sense where if Scotland come and bring him to Scotland, Glasgow and Edinburgh, you sense that they'll nearly drop him straight into a Scottish squad or and fast track him. So it's a tough one for him. And I'm not privy to what the conversations are with his agent and contract negotiations and all that kind of stuff. But it was pretty telling that he signed a 1-year contract last year and it wasn't longer. So he's certainly going to be tempted by it. I think the last couple of weeks would have not been great for him when he sees his lack of game time throughout December. So let's see what happens. I think the other night will certainly give him a boost, and he'll have a pep in his step going into Munster training this week.
Last one then on the Ulster game. When McFarlane comes out and criticises the players again, Stephen Ferris afterwards was talking about how there's only so many times you can do that before.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, when I'm asking about a crisis, it's like, well, you've done that publicly. There's been the various issues that they've had. Robert Coyle in the Texters is making the point, the logistics and getting to Sale, Frostgate, no leadership on and off the field, hurting financially, support waning, more to Ulster's issues than just playing poorly. It does seem like, what's happening on the field is a reflection of what's going on on a more wider basis at the club at the moment. There's a non-zero chance that McFarland isn't the coach next season, you got to presume the RFU want McFarland to stay and that they'll be buttressing him and supporting him, because the last thing they want is another change of coach there who comes in and says, "Oh, I've got a 3-year plan and we're all working towards the future."
Yeah, I think, look, it's I agree with Fez. I think if you and I'm sure behind the scenes he probably ripped him a new one, given the, when you go out and you're kind of trying to stay controlled after a game like that. But he was honest, and he has been honest, and he's but it's getting to that point that if, I think they will make the playoffs. They'll be knocking on the door in the URC. They were unlucky last year. They could have beaten the eventual winners in the semi-final. Stormers very unlucky in the end. But we talk about that a lot, don't we, Ger? Small margins and a little bit of bad luck and what ifs for Ulster. They've got to deliver. I think they're in a tough place in Europe as well, but they can still qualify. But the pressure is going to come on him a little bit, and internally, if you hear the coach kind of lambasting you, I'm sure he's been pretty tough on them this week, and they've got to pick themselves up their way in Benetton this week. So they've got to go there and win and possibly get 5 points and get back on track and turn this around. They are in a bit of a crisis at the moment. There's no doubt about that. One
suggestion here from Robert Coyle, who I think is our resident Ulster fan in the comments, is the RFU should send Ben Healy to Ulster. Billy Burns has to go. Like the Billy Burns experiment of him playing for Ireland, that those days are over, so I'm not really sure what the point of persisting with him as the 10 at Ulster is. Is there a world in which Ben Healy ends up...
Possibly, yeah, possibly. I think Jake Flannery obviously just went up there and he's not got a lot of game time, but it would be the best... it wouldn't be a bad scenario for Ireland to keep him here, and if he was playing with one of the other provinces, yeah, that would be great to keep him for with a view to playing for Ireland. But the Billy Burns thing is rumbling on. A lot of Ulster people talk about that, and it's an area where they're lacking that bit of control and composure, because when you think of McCluskey, Hume, Balakoon, Ethan McElroy, Michael Lowry, they're finishers. They've got pace, they've got quality, and at times it's not really their attack that's the problem. It's their control in games and where they play, and that composure that's needed. And he's not that type of player, Billy Burns, is he? He's a kind of off the cuff, and he's a bit of spark to him, and he's attacking. He runs a lot. So maybe they do need a little bit more of a pragmatic approach. I think their maul has been really good, and we've criticised their forwards a lot over the years, but they were porous and they were a bit soft the other night against Munster.
Just strikes me, Quinny, when we're talking about Munster and it being all sunshine and roses, because they, of course, got the right side of the result at the weekend. Like, attacking wise, after those interpros against Ulster and Leinster, they had the ball so often in the opposition 22 and can only, I guess, get over the try line a certain amount of times. Like Mike Prendergast surely will have a lot of stuff to work on, even regardless of all the positives we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's they had opportunities in the first half, didn't take them. I think what was most pleasing for this team was at the end. They didn't panic after the Jack Crowley break. We see that a lot with Munster. They make some bit of a break. There's no one on the shoulder. They go 40, 50 yards up the field, and then the ball is turned over. They knock it on, and it's the pressure has gone off the opposition. I think that bit of composure that they showed, and for Conor Murray to pass it to Ben Healy that time, we've seen Munster many times before, and under the old regime, they would have kept picking and going to actually give the pass there. And Shane Daly was outside him; he could have passed it Ben Healy, but that's where the space was, and for them to score there at that critical time. But of course, they'll look at that and they'll try and execute better. And they're far from the finished article, Shane. So no way am I suggesting that Munster are in a great position now. But I think they're showing positive signs, and they're enthusing, the Munster fans a little bit from where the results at the start of the season.
One last thing, Jordan Larmour's back. Is this something that might force the Ireland selectors' hands a bit?
Yeah, I think it was brilliant. He's had a dreadful time with injuries, a lack of form at times as well, coming back, picking up another injury. He's a brilliant player. and he has a little bit of niggle to him now. Even in that Munster match down in Thomond Park, he's trying to get in counter-rucking. At one stage, he's slamming into Munster forwards in a maul. But he has that brilliance. I think it was that X factor that you just can't coach in people. He has that. So trying to utilise that, getting it back, is another big boost. Ryan Baird was someone, outstanding performance from him as well. And they just flexed their muscles, didn't they, after about 55, 60 minutes, Leinster, and showed their quality. But when you have someone like Larmour making those line breaks, stepping people, it's just so many talented players they have. But I think it's brilliant to see Jordan Larmour back in action as well.
Quinny, good stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, lads.
It's Alan Quinlan giving us his thoughts there.